Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new podcast where we are going to talk about whatever is happening in Afghanistan. And for the very first time, we are witnessing something in the 21st century where a leader of the nation, Ashraf Ghani, who was the president of Afghanistan, had to flee away from his own country because of Taliban taking control over the capital of Afghanistan, which is Kabul. To understand the matter in depth, we have a defense enthusiast with us whose name is Surya Sanjay, who is the final year student at law faculty, Delhi University, and is also currently pursuing company secretaries alongside his legal studies. So, welcome Surya to this podcast. And how are you doing, first of all?
Hi, Sandesh. I'm doing good. I hope you and your family are safe as well. Uh, and I hope you're all healthy in these troubled times.
Thank you very much, Surya, for asking. Yes, we are also doing well. So, Surya, first of all, without wasting much time, let's dive deeper into, first of all, to understand like what is happening near a country besides us. So, what we are seeing currently is that almost every country near us is having some trouble. What happened in Afghanistan? How did things go out of control? And how did a small group of people, Taliban, captured over the entire government there?
Right. So I'll answer that in two parts. Right. First is what is the definition of capture? Right. So for this, right, if you look at the geography of Afghanistan, it's very important to look at it. 85% of the country is mountains, right? A very high mountains, which makes most of the country inhospitable for many parts, many months during the year. So when you say control, the Taliban will control this, or as of now, controls this for not throughout the year, but for certain times in the year. And Afghanistan, historically speaking, always had localized communities. Because of the geography, these communities used to be isolated, right? It's not just one ethnic group. There are multiple ethnic groups in Afghanistan, and they've all been isolated because of the geography, and they've all governed themselves. So a central government has never really fully been in control of every territory in Afghanistan ever, right? So when you say the Taliban has taken control, it means yes, the current government, that is the Western-backed government of Ghani, as you said, was supported and was in power for some time. Yes, it was in power for 20 years. It controlled some parts of the country, but they were deposed. But how much of the control the Taliban will be able to maintain will depend on the isolation of these communities, and if they will actually be receptive to the Taliban, because there's no physical infrastructure in the country like how we have in India, right? We have such a diverse land, but there's infrastructure, there's roads, there's railways, there's ports, and all of that to connect these places. There's nothing like that in Afghanistan. So we'll have to see how the Taliban manages these communities, and once we do that, only then we will be able to answer the question as to how well they'll be able to control the country by itself,
So
right?
before we move, just a follow up to this quick follow up. So how well and how supportive are these communities in favor of Taliban? Because what we understand, majority of Afghanistan is ruled over by warlords everywhere, almost in all smaller parts of the nation, right? So are
Yes,
these
yes.
warlords in favor of Taliban, or do they support the government, or what's the general situation there?
So look, see, here's the thing about warlords, right? Warlords can be bought and sold, right? So it's all about who gives them a better deal,
Hmm.
right? To put it very crudely, it's how, if the warlords are more prosperous under the Taliban, they will back the Taliban, right? Most of them. Of course, there are ideologues as well who will, say that, okay, I do not like what the Taliban is doing, and therefore I will not back them. But for the most part, you know how they are, right?
Hmm.
This is the country which has no law and order, nothing like that, and it's ruled by the gun.
Hmm.
So if when they see that the Taliban is gaining, gaining ground, gaining support from the ordinary Afghans, right? They will say, okay, look, it's good for business if I may be in the good books of the Taliban. Not that I have particularly anything to do with their ideology, but it's good for business, right?
Hmm.
So it will depend on that, right? But I mean, as we see things unfolding, as you yourself said, it seems that the not just the warlords, but the Afghan army itself is
Hmm.
just withered away, which means that there is a strong ground support for an organization or a body or whatever it is you call the Taliban, right? A terrorist group is what I call them. But a lot of people in Afghanistan might not see them the same way,
Hmm.
right? So, which is one of the central problems that every country faces today. It's that these guys, as crude, as evil as they are, enjoy legitimacy among a large section of the people. Yes, there are minorities like Hazaras and Shias, right? And there are women, of course, women and children who do not want to be under the control of Taliban for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
But then they are obviously subdued by
Hmm.
brute force, right? So yeah, I mean that's the way I would see it,
Hmm.
So yes, warlords bought and sold. That's my 2 cents on that.
Perfect. Yeah, you were continuing on your idea of like what is happening and what were the events that unfolded.
Yeah, yes. So basically, now what happened was uh, this is to do with both the previous U.S. administration under Trump and the current one under Biden. So one of the long-standing promises of the Trump administration and the Republican Party, which he was a part of, was that we will pull our troops out of all these meaningless wars,
Hmm.
which is a very good platform to sell in the US.
Hmm.
But there's a bit of a problem here,
Hmm.
right? In the country where your troops are, because your troops have gone in, right? They've bombed the country back to the Stone Age,
Hmm.
right? And now you just suddenly ask them to leave without any sort of plan, anything in place, right? So the thing is, now that was carried out by the Biden administration. Obviously, Trump lost power, Biden came to power. But what happened was he came out with a rather dramatic announcement a few months back, if you remember, saying
Hmm.
that by the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we would have pulled out all our troops out of Afghanistan,
Hmm.
right? So the thing is, all the Taliban had to do was just wait them out,
Hmm.
right? You just had to wait it out,
Okay,
wait for
I
the.
actually have a
Hmm,
follow-up here. So, do you think
yeah.
was it the other way around? Do you think that USA foreseed it to some extent that Taliban is going to outpower the forces there, and maybe it was time for them to start pulling back their resources to at least not win, not to not lose in one of the longest standing battles which were continuing in the century. So, do you think was it the other way around?
Not really. If you look at it from this in the eyes of the US, right,
Hmm.
the troop commitments in Afghanistan were very minimal. There were
Hmm.
around 5,000 troops in the entire country, right?
Okay.
In a country of 80 million, I think, is the population, or something like that. There are only about 5,000 US troops, right?
Hmm.
And scattered only in the major cities, Kabul, Mazar-e-Sharif, Kandahar, and Herat, right? So not much in the rural areas.
Hmm.
So there was not much military presence of the US in any case. And their spending in Afghanistan had obviously gone down since the time of the war, right?
Hmm.
I mean, since the 2001, obviously the expenditure has gone down significantly because of the less number of troops. But the fact is, it was just these 5,000 troops and the technicians and the engineers that they brought with them was keeping the Taliban at bay, right? Just 5,000 people, right? So now these guys, they said, okay, you know what? Because it's, as I said, it's popular politically, whether you're Democrat, Republican, pulling out troops from a country because you don't want them to suffer is obviously popular. And, Biden is the president of the US and he did what he thought was right for the US, right? Unfortunately, it's been 20 years, right? Since they invaded Afghanistan and they have not managed to make any yes, they did make a government, but nothing of substance that could actually hold the nation together.
Hmm.
So when Trump started doing deals with the Taliban,
Hmm.
of course in Qatar, right? Their political office is in Doha, by the way.
Hmm.
So they started dealing with the Taliban, for a negotiated withdrawal of the U.S. troops because, as I said, it's popular. The Taliban then realized, okay, look, this is going to happen someday or the other, and pretty soon as well,
Hmm.
because there's an election coming up, and they want to pull out troops as fast as possible. So all you have to do is just sit and wait them out. That's all they had to do,
Okay,
right?
got that.
Hmm.
Hmm. So, like, was the Afghan military so weak that I mean, it sort of crumbled in front of Taliban, or how did that like pan out, and what was the trigger, like the last trigger where this event unfolded, so that we get the current context clearly?
Right. Okay. So first of all, no, the Afghan military is not weak at all. In fact, the Afghan military outnumbered the Taliban by 1:4. Right?
Okay.
Uh, yes, it's about 75,000 Taliban troops with Hawaii chappals and drinking in Pepsi bottles and stuff like that, compared to the Afghan army, which is trained by the US. The US has spent since 2001. They spent almost $100 billion training the Afghan army and equipping them, obviously, with the latest American hardware, military hardware, and all of that. So it's not really that the Taliban outpowered the Afghan army in terms of numbers or technology or anything like that. It's just the fact that a lot of the soldiers in the army itself.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading reports about this. Of course, we'll hear more about it in the coming days and weeks. But a lot of troops defected,
Okay.
right? And they defected over to the Taliban, or they just gave up without a fight. They say, you know what, we don't want to do this, right? Maybe because some of them supported the Taliban. Maybe it's because some of them didn't want to just die in a firefight.
Mm.
But the fact is, a lot of troops just gave up without a fight, right? Uh, which is sad, which is very sad. But then again, one of the top uh, Afghan commanders, the army commanders, became the head of the Taliban's political office in Doha. So the feeling towards the Taliban, or the love, or whatever it is you want to call it, the support for the Taliban runs so deep, right?
Mm.
So it's not something that can be solved with bombs and guns and everything. It's something much deeper,
Mm.
something which the US did not realize,
Mm.
and hence you see the failure today,
Perfect.
right? So I would say that it's the long-standing support of the common Afghan people, uh, for the Taliban. A large section of Afghan people, obviously, there are people who don't like them, and their support for the Taliban, the that actually saw or led to what we are seeing right now.
Perfect. I think we have got the
Right?
current context clearly, that what happened and what were the trigger points because of which this event unfolded. Now let's go a step back to understand what was the historical context because of which such events started. Like, uh, from where do this event start? Like, from where did this conflict started in Afghanistan? Any ideas on such?
Okay. Yes. Yes. So if you really want to look at one point in time,
Hmm.
I would say 1979.
Hmm.
Right. So if you've read the book Kite Runner, there's a whole story about how the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. So if you remember, if you read the book, right? So basically, what happened was, that time it was the USSR, right? It was not Russia.
Hmm.
So the Soviet Union shared a border with Afghanistan,
Hmm.
and the Afghanistan is ruled by a communist government backed by the Soviets,
Hmm.
and they were failing, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, because lack of money and whole other reasons.
Hmm.
So what happened was, in 1979, Brezhnev, who was the premier of the Soviet Union,
Hmm.
ordered the invasion.
Hmm.
So Soviets rolled into Afghanistan, because of which the Americans, obviously, because they were in an ideological battle against communism, decided to fund Mujahideen.
Okay.
Okay, so bring in fighters from Pakistan, from Iran, from the Central Asian nations, the Muslim nations,
Hmm.
Syria, and all these places, right?
Hmm.
To train these Mujahideen and to fight against the Soviets.
Hmm.
So now fighters started pouring in from all over the Muslim world
Hmm.
to fight against, and some even from Europe. You've seen many of these white people joining these Islamic extremist groups, right? It's the same way. So these guys came in, they flushed it Afghanistan, right? And now the problem is, they need a staging ground,
Hmm.
right? Because the Soviets are deployed their full military might there, so they need a staging ground. So obviously, there's a nation we are all too familiar with, Pakistan,
Hmm.
right? Which has a very porous border with Afghanistan. I'll explain the situation of the border is
Hmm.
very important in the context of this. I'll explain later. But basically, Pakistan was used as a staging ground
Hmm.
for to train these mujahideen,
Hmm.
to equip them, arm them, and if they're injured in battle, their treatment happens
Hmm.
in Pakistan. So, and of course, because of that, the US had to do deals with Pakistan, ugly deals, right,
Hmm.
cozying up to the Pakistani regime. So they were trained there, and then they went into Afghanistan, and then they attacked the Soviets. Right. Obviously, by the time the 80s, mid 80s rolled around, Gorbachev came to power,
Hmm.
and then he realized this is a disaster, and we're not going to win this.
Hmm.
So he pulled out.
Hmm.
Right, in 1989, he pulled out. So now, all these guys, all these mujahideen that the Americans trained for 10
Hmm.
years, are just there. Right, they're all there. They all have weapons, and well, if they have weapons, you're going to want to use it, right?
Hmm.
So that began a civil war,
Okay.
right? So the civil war ended in 1994,
Hmm.
right? With the Taliban, or the Talib means student, by the way. So they're all students of what,
Hmm.
I'm guessing, radical Islamic ideology, right?
Hmm.
It's called Deobandi Islam, right?
Hmm.
It is very extreme sect of people who believe in some puritanical version that everybody will convert to Islam and all of that. So they're basically radicals, right? They're students of this. and Mullah Omar
Hmm.
was the guy. Right? He was the head of the Taliban, and he formed the government in Afghanistan in 1994. Right,
Hmm.
interim government, and then it became a proper full-fledged government in 1996,
Hmm.
recognized by only three countries. It was the UAE, Saudi, and Pakistan recognized these the Afghan government. So in 96, the government was formed, and then 5 years later, of course, the horrific events of 9/11 happened,
Hmm.
and then a few months later, the Americans invaded.
Hmm.
So then, the Taliban were obviously deposed, right?
Hmm.
Mullah Omar was deposed, and then later on, he was killed. I think he was killed a few years ago in a drone strike.
Hmm.
Um, Now the Russians were looking to get their revenge.
Hmm.
So what did they do? They started funding and training the Mujahideen, or
Hmm.
this time the Taliban, right?
Hmm.
So what the Americans did to the Soviets in the 70s and 80s, right?
Hmm.
These Russians started doing back to the Americans once they invaded.
Hmm.
So now, yeah, exactly, right. So and again, so when the Afghan government, the Taliban government was deposed, right?
Hmm.
It was the phrase, you heard the phrase "dog catching the car," right?
Yeah.
So they caught the car. They deposed the Taliban. Now what? So they had no clue,
Okay. Yeah.
right? So they set up a government of it was Hamid Karzai at the time, right?
Hmm.
Hamid Karzai and a few others, and they set up a Western-backed democracy thing, which obviously does not work in Afghanistan, as you and I know,
Okay.
right? Which was seen as installed, which
Hmm.
basically lacked legitimacy in the eyes of a large number of Afghans, and it was also corrupt,
Hmm.
right? And because of which they simply did not have the kind of control that a government should have had, right?
Okay.
So
Hmm.
the Taliban were always there, and of course, with the backing of Pakistan,
Hmm.
and so the Taliban were there, right? And they were constantly, attacking U.S. military bases and suicide bombings and all of that.
Hmm.
But so because of the illegitimacy of the Afghan government and the fact that the U.S. invasion obviously did not do wonders for Afghan relations with the U.S. because they committed a lot of atrocities, the NATO forces. The Taliban never went away. They only gained legitimacy. They brought these people under control either through ideology or through force.
Hmm.
And as I said, so now the result is for everybody to see.
Perfect. I think I get that idea
Right.
clearly. So yeah, historical context is also completely clear in front of us. But what is even more important for us as Indians is that what we increasingly see is that almost every nation surrounding the country, surrounding our own country, starting from let's say Pakistan to China to even having like some sort of control in countries like Nepal, etc. What we see is that almost every country around us is having some sort of instability, and with now uh, Afghanistan also sharing that same story, India happens to be in a very sort of not so comfortable position in the coming days. So,
Right.
what are the first of all news that you have on an umbrella level, on a blanket level, and then we can move deeper into how Pakistan and India's relation will go ahead.
Right. So yes, you're absolutely right. Our neighborhood is a bit of a mess, to say the least. But I mean, I think we've dealt with a very similar neighborhood even when India was a much weaker nation,
Hmm.
right? So right now, of course, the Indian economy is much bigger than what it was in the 90s, right?
Hmm.
And because of which Indian military strength is also much greater than what it was in the 90s.
Hmm.
So it will not be very easy for uh, the what's happening in these countries to spill over into India,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Of course, China, it's a border dispute which is currently being managed,
Hmm.
right? So I would not say that's as much as a problem as this right now.
Hmm.
um, that will be in the future, but right now if I'm looking at it, I would say that the issue is that once the Taliban takes over, I mean, which apparently it has already,
Hmm.
that guy is being sworn in pretty soon. They will try, the Pakistani establishment will try and move these fighters from Afghanistan to Kashmir, right,
Yeah.
and create trouble there, right. Of course, it's one thing for Afghanistan to try and take over territory in their own land, and
Hmm.
it's a completely different thing for them to attack another nation, which
Hmm.
is a nuclear armed nation, and which is one of the strongest militaries in the world. So I would not be too worried
Hmm.
about that right now.
Hmm.
But what we'll have to see is the effect on Pakistan and Afghanistan, in these two countries in particular.
Exactly. So
You
I
know,
think I
I
had
think that
this question that what majority of the people are also thinking is that Pakistan acts as a buffer state between us and Afghanistan,
right,
right? But what we have also seen in past few dealings that we have already had with Taliban, while this plane IC-814 got hijacked. So what are the lessons that we draw from such incident where we had to deal with such people already, and where we saw ISI people on the behalf of Taliban negotiating with us? So what are your views from such end?
Right. So good you brought up the IC-814. That is very important to give us context here. But just to be brief, I'll explain it. That in '99, an Indian Airlines flight taking off from Kathmandu to Delhi was hijacked midair, taken to Lahore, Amritsar, Lahore, Dubai, and then Kandahar. Right. And then this was for the release of a certain Masood Azhar, among other among other people held in Indian jails. And the release of Masood Azhar, well, we've seen it time and time again, the effect of that. So this is very important for the reason that once a group like the Taliban takes over Afghanistan, right, it's a powder keg, so to speak. You don't know, I mean, a lot of maniacs will suddenly have a country of their own, like how the ISIS was, right? It is
Yeah.
so important not to allow ISIS to gain, territory and all that. But right now you have an entire country, right, which is so strategically located in the hands of terrorists. So now, um, yes, Pakistan will obviously try and export some of that here, that being their only and best export. But and that is the one thing that we should really be worried about, because I'm not worried. I mean, worried about them invading India. That's not going to happen, right? I mean, Pakistan has tried 4 times and it's failed miserably, right? So I'm not worried about an invasion per se, because I don't think the Afghans are really interested. The Taliban is really interested in that. But what they could do is pick out stray fighters from the Taliban and, as I said, send them to Kashmir or try and do something in Punjab or something like that. But yes, so that is the one thing that we should really be worried about. But I think we can manage that right now, because, as I said, we're a lot stronger nation than we were back in the day. Uh, so yeah, that is the one thing that we should be focusing on. And yes, speaking of dealing with the Taliban, you should know that there's not one Taliban, right? There are many factions in the Taliban. So one of them is the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, right? If you remember the Peshawar attack in 2014, the attack on the school kids, right? That was carried out by them. So they actually do not like the Pakistani establishment, right? So they're a completely different group, right? And they do not like the Pakistani establishment for reasons I will get to, right? So basically, these are guys that India has dealt with. Of course, not that we as in any way supported or sponsored the attack on the school kids, but these are groups we have dealt with in the past because of their strong hatred towards Pakistan. And I think we will manage it this way for the foreseeable future. First things first is to get all our people out of there, right? And then we'll have to see what to do, because let's face it, the Taliban is a reality. They're not going to go away, right?
Yeah,
So
I think we had a complementary question which we left over, which was the borderline between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and how it is not so properly drawn that there is a distinction which could be made, right? So how does that pan out for us?
Yeah, so that is actually a bit of a doozy for Pakistan. It will be in the long run, because that border is actually drawn by the British, right? In 1893, if I'm not wrong. So that border does not follow any geographical pattern or any ethnic group pattern, nothing, right? It's just basically the Durand. He was the guy, right? So the line is called Durand line, right? So he just saw the map. He said, okay, look, this is the border, and I'm drawing it, right? So yeah, this border was drawn actually to manage the situation with Afghan Empire back then, and also to ensure that Afghanistan is a buffer state between the British Empire and the Russian Empire, right? Right. So here's the problem: the border goes right through extremely mountainous territory, which cannot be physically policed by anybody, right? That's one problem. And the second problem is that border divides the Pathans, the Pashtuns, if you've heard the word Pashtun, right? So suddenly the Pashtuns found themselves on the other side of the Durand line in a different country. They are ethnically Afghans, right? Ethnically, they're just like the brothers in Afghanistan, but the fact is they are now separated by a border and they're a different country. So the thing is, that border is never, up until this day,
Mhm.
was never recognized by Afghanistan. In fact, when Pakistan applied to join the UN in 1947, there was
Mhm.
only one country that opposed their joining the UN, and that was Afghanistan,
Okay.
because of the fact that because they do not recognize the border as it stands.
Hmm.
So the thing is, right now, the border problem will probably get worse for Pakistan, because look, now the Pathans have their own country,
Hmm.
right? And now the Pathans on the Pakistani side of the border are going to say, look, we belong to that country, not to Pakistan.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's going to be problems, right?
Hmm.
There's going to be a lot of problems, right? And that is something that Pakistan, I'm guessing they haven't fully thought through, all of that, because their first aim at the time was to get as much money as possible from the Americans. So they did basically whatever the Americans asked them. So yeah, I mean, this is obviously not going to happen now, right?
Okay.
This is only going to unfold over a few years. But yes, this is something that we will definitely see, and this is a direct result of the fact that the border is so haphazard and cannot be policed.
Sure. I think that gives us a very clear idea about what is happening in the Indian subcontinent, what is our positioning here. But I think it's time to now move towards even a bigger picture, which is a global picture of what and like what is the role that first of all US is going to play out of in this situation, and our ally in indirectly, which is where we are in Quad. So how do you think this situation where Taliban overtook the Afghan government is going to play out in a larger diplomatic picture from US's end and from Quad's end?
Right. So first, I'll address the US question. I mean, the US seemed to be in denial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Secretary of State Blinken came out and said, this is victory. I mean, I don't know what he meant by that, but he said we won. So, I mean, I don't think someone asked him this, but I don't know how you win by allowing the group you fought for 20 years to take
Exactly.
over the country,
Yeah.
right? That's ridiculous, right?
Ridiculous. Yeah.
And yeah, and he, in fact, I'm going to quote him, right? So he said, "This has nothing to do with Vietnam. This is nothing like Vietnam," and this is something that Biden also said a month back. When today we saw the exact same picture we saw in April 1975, when Saigon was the capital of South Vietnam,
Hmm.
right? The last chopper taking U.S. personnel
US.
out
Embassy.
of the embassy in Saigon. Yes, the exact same picture was taken today
Yeah.
in
Exactly.
Afghanistan, in Kabul, right? So I don't know what they even mean, or what those two mean when they say, we won,
Hmm.
because I mean, they're obviously, they put their head in the sand, right? There's no reality to what they're saying. But yes, so now see, when you come to the US, right? So now they're basically in the middle of the night, and this I'm not joking.
Hmm.
So the main Air Force base in Afghanistan is called Bagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is north of Kabul. In the middle of the night, they switched off the electricity to the base, took the keys to all the vehicles. This is actually true, right? This is actually true. I thought this was satire, but it's actually true that
Actually,
they
it
took the
sounds.
vehicles. It does, but it's true. All the keys to the vehicles, all their Toyotas and Humvees and MRAPs and all of that, they took their keys. They switched off the power, and they just left in the middle of the night without telling the Afghan government, right? Yes, this is true. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it's true,
Hmm.
right? And because of which the pressure on the Kabul airport right now is very high,
Hmm.
because there's so many flights that are being taken to evacuate these people.
Hmm.
If Bagram was open, it would not be such a problem. But well, so now when other countries look at the US, they will say, okay, these guys came into this country, they whatever they did for 20 years, and then they just left,
Hmm.
and they let the country go to the dogs.
Hmm.
So this is going to have serious implications, in my view, as to any country that wants to do deals with the US, because they'll say, okay, look, the US is not trustworthy.
Hmm.
Very simply put, nobody can trust them. Now, for 20 years, it's not a problem, because they were the sole superpower. They ran the show,
Hmm.
right? So nobody could really bully them into anything.
Yeah. Now we
But
have.
right now there's a bit of a problem, because China is also a superpower. Let's
Exactly.
face it, as much as you and I don't like China, we have to respect the fact that they are a superpower, right? And they do not have to listen to the US.
Hmm.
So now wherever the US is lacking, which is clearly everywhere, right? China will just come in, and they will say, okay, whatever the US could not do, we will do for you. Now, whether they will do it or not is a different question. But the fact is, there is somebody to challenge the US here.
True.
So now, when a country is looking to make deals, they will hedge their bets. If the US are found to be slightly untrustworthy, they will just say, you know what, I'm sorry, we can't trust you, and they will just move their allegiance towards China. So this is something that is going to happen. This is something that the US is going to face now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, not from everywhere, not from the West at least, but especially in the African countries and the Asian countries. So coming to the Quad, since so Quad, of course, is a group. It's not a military alliance, but it's a group of the four democracies: Japan, Australia, India, and the US. So and all of these countries, well, they don't say it out loud, but they mainly aim to contain China in the Indo-Pacific. But now, looking at this, if the US just pulled their troops out of Afghanistan just like that, with no regard to
Yeah,
anybody
exactly.
else's interests,
Oh, we cannot even
right?
perfectly believe like them standing for
We can't.
Quad as well, right?
We, we can't. So now just think about it. If there is a conflict between India and China, I mean, I don't think there will be, because both countries don't want it. But say there is something like Galwan, which escalates into something more violent, right? Which takes across the entire eastern border.
Mm.
How will the Indian military planners legitimately say that the US is backing us? They can't, because that doubt will always be there. The US will probably say, okay, we'll commit troops or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot rely on it, because they very well might not just come, right? Now, I'm not saying that they'll just let us be or something. I'm not saying that
Got
that's
that.
what
Yeah.
US is going to do, but the fact is, what they did now just clearly shows that they are, extremely unreliable when it comes to dealing with you know when it comes to dealing with them, right? And this is something that Indian strategic planners are going to factor into their calculations. See, nobody is going to invade Australia, because Australia is an ocean away and China cannot actually invade them,
Yeah.
and neither can they invade Japan,
Japan.
right?
Yeah.
So the only realistic target for China to meddle with is India. And so now our troops and our generals and our politicians will obviously be taking this into account, that, okay, look, if there's a flare up, if there is a conflict, we cannot rely on American military support. Yes,
True.
we'll get intelligence, we'll get satellite, sure, but troop commitments and things like that, we can't rely on them anymore. So this is going to have some real problems for them, right? uh, I mean, I'm not saying the Quad is going to break up, obviously. That's very childish to say, but yes, they will suffer from a very they'll suffer from a huge trust deficit
True.
from the international community,
Yeah. So actually, I
and we are
had
seeing that.
yeah. Actually, I was having this conversation with one of my friends. So the conversation was along the lines that we are not exactly enemies with China. We just have a border dispute to some extent, right? So given what is
Right.
playing out, majorly in a way that India is almost surrounded by everything that is controlled by China, and we know that China is a superpower, and there are two superpowers now. What do you
Right.
think would be the better stance for India, which is to say, is it good for us to now start having softer stance with China to understand, to improvise our situation? Because what we have usually seen in past is also that we tried to have softer stance with them, but the response from their side, which is Chinese side, was not so well taken, right? So what do you think? Like, is it now high time for us to think to start switching sides to say so?
No, I would say no, not at all.
Mhm.
For the simple reason that, yes, America is a untrustworthy ally, but
Mhm.
China is an enemy, right? So here's the deal, right? China claims territory that belongs to India,
Mhm.
right? China has actually engaged in a physical conflict with India, not once, twice, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and obviously, because of which, and they're obviously funding efforts in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and Maldives and Nepal, right,
Yeah.
to destabilize, or to undermine India's position in the region,
Mhm.
right? So that is something we can't just get up one morning and just reverse that. That's
Mhm.
not going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So no, we absolutely cannot trust China. So I mean, the fact that US is untrustworthy cannot mean we can trust China. Absolutely not. It's the devil of the deep blue sea, as as you've heard, right? So see, here's the deal. As weird or as uncomfortable as it sounds, the best deal for us right now is to build better relations with the US. And here's why, right? See, obviously, India and Afghanistan can't be compared. Now,
Mhm.
if something like pulling troops out of Afghanistan is not going to affect the U.S. government, within their own country, right?
Exactly.
Diplomacy, they'll somehow manage. They have money and muscle, they'll manage it.
True.
But if they try and if they leave India out to dry, right?
Mhm.
There are 3 million Indian Americans who are extremely influential, right,
Mhm.
and rich, right, and fund both parties, right.
Yeah.
So along with that comes a very, very powerful lobby,
Mhm.
right? Not to mention the Indian government's own lobbying,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. True.
A- right, and the fact that India buys huge amounts of American arms.
Hmm.
So if something like that were to happen, if the US were to leave India out to dry like that, the weapon sales would stop. That's tens of billions of dollars of arms sales, which they do not want to stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, the Indian American the community,
Diaspora.
right? I mean, diaspora, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it doesn't matter who's in power in India, that is something they will not stand for,
Hmm.
letting China bully India like that. And if the US just sits by and does nothing, there will obviously be political ramifications back at home for the government. So that is something, as I said, so they won't just leave us out to dry.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we should not be foolish to think that, if there is a war with China, and the US will just come blazing, all guns blazing and support us. No, so we have to, balance both. But I still believe that maintaining better relations with the US is good for us. And that is what I think India will do. I mean, despite the setback in Afghanistan, this is what we will do.
Perfect. I think we have a now fair idea as to understand where is India headed towards, right? Let's end this
Right.
conversation by talking about last question, which is where do you see the bipolar world heading towards? Because now we have like clear directions of like China is now a superpower. There's no denial. Like if somebody is in a denial, then that's a delusion for that country, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Right.
uh, where is the like the world headed towards? Where is the power going to shift more? Is it US, China? And what do you think about that?
Right. So I will address that very generally, right? Because a lot to go into it. But I will say this: if the Chinese are under the impression that every country that has a good alliance with the US is going to just cut and run and come to China, they're kidding, right?
Hmm.
It's because the US influence is not just because of money;
Mhm.
it's because of military power, and it's because of the especially during the post World War II, the international structure is
Mhm.
all centrally controlled by America, right?
Mhm.
Now, just for example, right, in the South China Sea, right, the Chinese Navy, the People's Liberation Army Navy, does not have a single military base outside the Chinese mainland, right?
Okay.
The US Navy has bases in Indian Ocean, has bases in Philippines, has bases in Singapore, so they have Japan, Korea, Taiwan as well, right?
Mhm.
They don't have base in Taiwan, but yes, they have military drills with them. So the point is the US geopolitical the machine, right? It's very well oiled, and
Mhm.
China does not have that, and they cannot get that by bullying smaller countries.
True.
So what they're trying to do with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, saying that if you don't toe our line, we will cut off aid, and that's not going to work, right? So
Exactly.
that is the wolf warrior diplomacy, as it's called. That's not really going to work for China. So I still think that the US will still maintain its global hegemony, but it is declining clearly.
Mhm.
And regarding the issue with China, since you brought it up, the Uyghur Muslims,
Mhm.
right? These are some people we need to talk about. As you know, the Chinese government is putting them in concentration camps. A million of them are in concentration camps in the Xinjiang region, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
far northwest of China,
We saw a
right?
few satellite
So
images coming out for that, right?
yes, 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 yes. Of course, some of the accounts of the survivors are absolutely heartbreaking.
Mhm.
What they did to those, especially women, it's terrible, right? But the fact is that these people are not ethnically Chinese,
Mhm.
right? These people are ethnically Central Asian Muslim people, right? Who have Mongol descent and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there is this movement called the East Turkestan movement, right? So all your Central Asian Muslim countries are Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all of these guys, right? Is a part of this East Turkestan movement. Not the governments, but the people and their advocates believe in this particular movement. So that East Turkestan also includes Xinjiang because it's an ethnically Muslim population.
Oh.
Excuse me. Yes. So that is somewhere that is one part which China really worries about, right?
Mhm.
Which is why they put these people in camps,
Mhm.
because they do not want the East Turkestan movement to penetrate these Uyghurs, right?
Mhm.
Because if that happens, they'll have a security situation, right,
Mhm.
in a very critical part of the world, right,
Mhm.
on their western border. And that is something that, well, now China is trying to manage that by recognizing the Taliban government. They are saying that if the Taliban takes over, we will recognize him immediately
Mhm.
in the for the exchange that or for a deal where the Taliban and the their proxies and all their groups do not interfere with what China is doing in Xinjiang. So I
Mhm.
would say that I mean, China is being really smart about this. I mean, I don't like to, say that with what they're doing, but let's face it, they're being smart.
Hmm.
They're not trying to be ideologues, and they're not trying to look at. They're just making sure that their business is safe,
True.
right? So they're managing relations with the Taliban, and they are negotiating, mining and everything else, the engineering projects in Afghanistan with the Taliban.
Hmm.
So I think that is the East Turkestan thing is something that we should look out for. Of course, I don't think it'll lead to much, honestly, because China is an authoritarian regime and they'll just crush anything that comes in its way.
Yeah.
But this is an angle that will definitely be looked out for,
Mhm.
and something that will, probably spur some sort of resistance in the future, and will cause problems for China as well.
I think, yeah. Yeah, so I think that sums up everything in a very explained, in a comprehensive manner. What was the situation? How did it pan out? Our implications for the country, the global hegemony heading towards the region, to the bipolar world, right? So, so on this note, I think we would end this podcast, and I would like to thank you for taking out time. It was an absolutely delight to host you, to talk with you, to understand the issue in such a depth, because even I just read it from a superficial manner, right? But talking with you has like opened my eyes towards the context.
Oh no, that's no problem. Thank you for having me, Sandesh.
Have a good day. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.